16 years ago, when I was first elected to Congress, I had the first hearings on this issue and invited my old college professor to be the lead-off witness.
Really?
And I've been digging into it more and more since that time. Of course, when I ran for president in 1988, I used to be the next president of the United States.
Yes.
I said this would be...
in the introductions. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States, Senator Al Gore.
That's right.
Yes. It sounded good anyway.
It did.
Yes. And I hope someday you'll run again.
Well, thank you.
That's a personal thing.
I decided not to run this time around and announced it last August because 2.5 years ago my son was almost killed. And the healing process, which began with his terrible accident,
that's horrible,
has been one that has involved my whole family, and it was impossible for me to feel right about ripping myself out of their lives to run full-time for president during that healing process. And actually, that incident was one of the reasons I began this book. After several weeks by his bed in the hospital room, thinking, you know, differently about a lot of things in my life, I began to think differently about this issue also. I had already made many journeys to the front lines of the ecological crisis around the world. The North Pole, the South Pole, the Amazon. I was on my way to visit Chico Mendes when he was assassinated. The Aral Sea.
Assassinated the next day, was it? Or?
No, it was actually about a week later.
A week later, yeah.
But we were
on the way.
On the way, and on the first stops on the trip when he was murdered. In any event, I had visited the front lines of this crisis, and my experience was a little bit like the parable of the blind men and the elephant. You may know that story where one has hold of a leg and the other has hold of the trunk and another the tail, and they don't understand that at first that they all have a different part of the same animal. That was similar to my way of learning about the global environmental crisis. But then when this personal crisis occurred to me and my family and my son, that was a piece of the puzzle that I had not understood before. I began to see patterns in my own life that were part of the cause of this crisis. Most of us take 3,000 pounds of metal with us everywhere we go. And I began to see...
air-conditioned metal.
That's correct. I began to see all of the ecological crises like global warming and ozone depletion and the disappearance of the rainforests and the loss of living species, all as symptoms of a deeper underlying crisis, which is a collision between our civilization as it's now constructed and the ecological system of the earth. There have been three big changes in the relationship between our civilization and the earth which have led to this collision. Number one, the population explosion, which is now adding one China's worth of people every 10 years.
Every 10 years,
one Mexico's worth of people every 12 months. Secondly, the scientific and technological revolution, which especially in this century has given us thousands of new technologies that magnify our ability to exploit the earth. And then third, our way of thinking about the relationship between us and the earth, which in relatively recent times has led us to believe we're separate from nature, entitled to exploit it with impunity, when actually we're part of the ecological system, and what we do to the earth ends up having an effect on us, whether we put harmful chemicals in it or damage the integrity of the global atmosphere or whatever.
Your analysis in the book is one that I think is very inspiring, and I'm glad the subtitle, Ecology and the Human Spirit, you really do appeal to the spirit. It is, on the one hand, with all the statistics that you presented here, and it's not just done in a dry statistical way. I was very pleased the way it was, but backed up scientifically anyway. that it's obvious that we have a lot of troubles. Used to be 10, 15, 20 years ago, when anybody ever mentioned whatever it was, whether it was to save the white spotted owl or the whatever one little species, you know, those were weird people that just liked that damn little owl, cute little thing it was, and we want a new development to go in there.
Yeah.
And it took, in a relatively short time, time for us to look at what's going on around the world. But in time, that is to say, in the continuum of time, it used to be that things were disaster, whatever the disasters were, thousands of years away, were they not? And each year, I'm talking about each year now since the 80s, it's those thousands are becoming hundreds, are becoming decades, are becoming, my God, it might be tomorrow. What do you respond there? Because of the urgency enough to try to turn this elephant that you say, to figure out you got an elephant and we need to do something about that. What do we do about that?
Well, I've begun to think of the problem in terms that I first learned about on the Armed Services Committee and dealing with military issues. In the military, people are used to thinking of local battles, regional theaters of action, and global or strategic conflicts. And the environmental issues, it seems to me, fall into the same categories. Most of the ones we hear about are local environmental problems. Recently, with acid rain, we've begun to see regional environmental problems. But the ones that are most serious by far are in this brand new category of global or strategic environmental problems. For example, the air we're breathing into our lungs right now, just like the air being breathed by every single one of your viewers right now, has 600% more chlorine atoms in each breath than it did 40 years ago. Now, that doesn't hurt health directly.
But only 40 years is
yes,
one thing.
But that change has taken place just so quickly. And because it affects the entire global atmosphere, it does have an indirect effect on our health. Because that's what burns the ozone layer. Just a few weeks ago, we had the news that a new ozone hole could, according to the scientists, open above the northeastern United States this year.
Not that pole place, northeastern United States.
That's correct. And that means damage to the immune system, or skin cancers and cataracts. And, you know, people who are confronted with local environmental problems, like the effort to site a new landfill, for example, often get very involved with the issue because they feel like their backyards are threatened. What's changing now is the definition of backyard.
That's right.
Because when the process of global environmental destruction affects our backyards, then we begin to get involved. That's one of the reasons, incidentally, that you can go into any elementary school classroom in this nation and ask the children what they think is the biggest issue in the future, and they will say very quickly the threat to the global environment.
Hi, this is Tony Arangio, and welcome to this edition of Arangio at Large. For those of you who question every day whether you think you're doing the right thing, know what you're doing, and maybe call it something in the area of self-esteem, I have with me an expert now, at least an expert in self-esteem. Her name is Gloria Steinem, who's written a book, Revolution from Within. Yes, it's the same Gloria Steinem from Ms. Magazine and all the years and years and years that you've devoted to the women's movement. And we can't ignore any of what you've done before, but this book I found to be, and I'm not a book reviewer. We do choose who we get on the show, and we say we'd like to have Gloria Steinem with her book on the show, but I hadn't read it before, is a very scholarly look at the concept of self-esteem, which one would think would be fairly simple. You know, what happened when you were born, and that kind of thing, but you attacked it from, the word attack is probably not the right word, examined it from a myriad of perspectives. And how did you start, why did you start, and how did you do the framework for looking at the concept?
Well, I started about 5 years ago, I think, because I had spent so many years wandering around the country being an organizer or whatever it is I am, and
what you're going to be when you grow up.
Yes, right. And meeting women who were courageous and smart and accomplished, you know, who just didn't believe in themselves, and who very often started sentences with, "It's probably only me, but..."
Oh, I love that
part
of your book, yes.
And
difference of how we talk, men and...
Right, our speech patterns, but, you know, who really lacked belief in themselves, even sometimes when they were very accomplished. So I had started to go into bookstores to look for books to give them, since I believe in bibliotherapy. I mean, that's, books have really helped me in that way.
Yes.
And the books that I found, though, you know, they had lots of useful parts to them, behaved as if our internal life were somehow separate from the world outside.
Yes.
And it almost blamed the victim. You know, if you raise your self-esteem, everything will be fine.
Get over it. Look in the mirror and tell yourself 10 times a day, I am beautiful, I am wonderful, I am smart.
Yes, affirmations and so on, which is fine.
Yes.
But we need to understand how political our self-esteem is in the deepest anthropological sense of political.
Yes.
And that the structures of authority in the outside world undermine our self-authority, so we will obey them.
Yes.
So I decided...
subtly, we're not just talking gross examples.
No,
very, very subtle. In fact, I have, if I can think of all three of them, 3 that I just heard within the last 2 days that I thought I need to mention that to Gloria
Yes, well,
Steinem.
go ahead.
Okay, well, there was an article in Parade magazine Sunday, the usual article about teenagers, and the article was in response to, they asked a bunch of female teenagers, is it true what John X or whoever it was that had written in months before said that nice guys can't ever get a girl, rather than a woman, a young girl, to like them because they're too nice. They like men to push them around. And they asked the girls, young girls, this. And their responses were very, very interesting. And not stereotypical necessarily, but they kind of fell into certain patterns. And they had to do with the reformer aspect of the woman, saying, well, they were more of a challenge, and I felt like I could change them and save them.
The rescue fantasy.
Yes, and you talk about that in your book, about having that part of you that you give up for you to save and heal and mother or nurture or whatever. That was interesting. I heard an advertisement for a public service advertisement on the way over here today. Had to do with a woman's voice shaking. I'm so scared, she said, and I'm nervous, so I'm going to talk, and you really feel it's real. And I thought it was a promo for Oprah or something like that. And she's saying, I saw the car coming, and I put on my brakes, and I crashed, and I thought I was going to die. I said, oh my God, I'm going to die. But now I'm worried for another reason. I'm going home, but I'm really more worried about John, or whatever his name is, because now I know he'll leave me when he sees my face because of the way it is. And the tagline is, and that's almost verbatim, the tagline is, don't speed, it can only mess up your life or kill.
That's incredible.
And that's a public service announcement.
Right. Some service. Serving half the public.
And
I don't know about the other.
My God, I've got to tell that to Gloria Steinem.
Yeah.
That's very subtle. It sounds like a perfectly acceptable ad about don't speed, you could hurt yourself. But the hook
message is, of course,
he'll leave me because of the way I look.
Yes, right. No, that's a great example. And there are huge kind of subterranean examples too, like religion, which depicts God as a male figure and as a white figure, and thus, in a very deep way that I don't think we've really fully even comprehended yet, convinces people who are female and people who are not white that somehow God is other than us.
Yes.
You know, that we have less God within us, so to speak, than some other groups. And
or
of course,
at best, even though it's bad, so benevolent that they still will accept you, but you're inferior to the degree that you're not
the authority lies elsewhere.
I'll let you win.
Right, and also it has a different kind of, but also negative impact on the group that's portrayed as God, because then if man is God, God is man, you know, so you have to behave in a godly way, which is an impossible standard, and then you feel bad about yourself. So I think that in a very deep sense, men and women and different groups to differing degrees, are undermined by hierarchical structures, so we will stick in this hierarchy and keep striving also in a consumerist society to buy ever more things in order to fix ourselves up and so on. So it goes very deep.
Yeah.
You keep telling a child he's special long enough, they'll believe it.
Yeah.
I believed it. I started thinking I was special.
Exactly.
Child abuse in this country doesn't come from whips and sticks and hitting kids.
Yeah.
Child abuse is when they tell their
soul.
children, you piece of garbage, I wish you'd never came out of me. I can't stand you. You've made my life terrible. You're not going to be anything. You're going to be like your father, whoever he is. I can't stand you. Get the hell out of my house.
You don't have to say that too many times without destroying.
You've destroyed it, and if you say it long enough, then when you say, you know, you're a good kid, Mom, I know how you really feel about me. That is
and then what do they live up to?
It's like when you put a kid in a, what are these, high-risk youths.
Yeah.
You put them in a high-risk class, how do you expect them to act, like a genius?
Yeah.
They did a study. They took a bunch of high-risk youths and a bunch of kids who did very well on these special tests.
Right.
And they told the kids who were very smart, they said, look, we looked at your test scores, we had a psychologist look at it, you're just memorizing all this, you're really not that smart.
Right.
The high-risk kids, they said, we looked at your
Totally
test scores,
opposite.
you're very intellectual, you're almost geniuses. For a whole year, they put these kids in their classes. The high-risk kids did wonderful.
Right.
The geniuses did terrible.
Yeah.
Japan is kicking our butt. Let's be honest about it. I don't want them telling us anything. Don't come to my house and tell me anything.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But I'm going to tell you the truth, because they have a couple of things that we've lost. First of all, they respect their elders. You do not talk to an old person in Japan without standing up and asking permission, first of all.
Right.
And second of all, they expect a lot out of their children. Children are like cattle. In the great state of Texas that I'm in, we should understand this. Children are like cattle. You put cattle in a fenced-in area, they walk the fence yard. Every 24 hours, if there's a hole in it, they leave.
That's right.
What we've done to our children is we
Yeah.
put too many holes in the
Too
fences. You don't expect a lot out of your children, you don't get anything. My daddy told me a long time ago, you remember this, college or death. Two choices.
Yes.
I'm not a fool, I picked college.
Yes.
And the most amazing thing is, I'm forcing these kids, they love to party. I'm sending them the biggest parties in the country.
Yes.
I don't want to stop them from jamming. I just want to change their dance partners from crackheads, weed heads, prostitutes, and dropouts to engineers, doctors, teachers, and lawyers.
Yes.
Go party at college.
When you did Donahue, they showed the scene, because I had seen it before, of the young man in the audience who really got up and was angry at you and saying, you have no right to be calling me. If you want to get my attention, you don't call me dumb or whatever. And of course, what you were trying to do in those 11 minutes that they only gave you 2.5 minutes to do, and you stretched it out to 11, was to compact your spiel, which is that you do start out to your kids' audiences and your adult audiences.
Demanding respect.
Demanding respect, and trying to point out in their vernacular
what's going on.
what's going on.
But, you know, and I blew this on Donnie here, so I can say it here.
Yeah.
I really did. I had so many things. You know,
Too
I'm
many
on a
things to
mission.
say,
I'm on a mission.
yes.
And all these things are going through my head.
Yes.
And the lights go on, the
You're trying to
commercials
save somebody's
go on.
life.
That's right. This is for
and you're
real.
going, I got to tell you this. And if said, sorry, we got to go to a commercial. I said, wait a minute, I'm just going to save a person's life. What the hell are you doing?
Well, I forgot to say this, but that same kid, first of all, if you heard what he said, my mother and father never told me to go to college. Who the heck do you think you are?
Exactly.
Tell me. Well, there's the problem right
That's
there.
right.
17 years, he finally heard the truth, and it did not feel good.
No.
That young man came up to me after the show.
Did he?
Took out his earring, promised me to go to college if I gave him an autograph. That same man. He was angry.
Yeah.
These kids are angry. They've been lied to for 17 years. Here comes Drew Brown, flight suit, gold wings, bad, telling him the truth.
Right.
Well, how come nobody else told me?
And they all seem to think, even on the current Donahue show, the people in the audience seem to think, some of those that got up and argued with you, that you had a soft life. Who are you?
Some people say I'm lucky. They're right. The harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yes, exactly right. And you had your downs. You did have your downs. You did experiment with stuff, and not experiment. You got down and out and all that kind of stuff.
I was a knucklehead.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, you're not talking about it because you're coming at it from some intellectual, I don't mean it's not intellectual, but not some intellectual only level. You're saying, I lived it, and I found out, and I was lucky. I worked hard, but I was lucky, and things happened, and I didn't die from when I was drinking too much. I didn't get knifed. I didn't get a social disease like AIDS that's going to kill me. None of that happened. Plus, you met a neat lady who kind of straightened your...
Who was everything. My wife is everything.
Yeah.
But I use I use a piece of material now in my whole message. This is it. It's a prop.
Yeah.
You want to see the person?
Your glasses.
Well, you want to see the person who's going to make you an Emmy winner? a person who's going to make you the best television host in the world, who I think you are anyway.
Yeah,
a person who's also going to introduce you to crack, who's going to send you to prison, who's going to pay your rent, who's not going to pay your rent, who's going to get put in jail. There he is.
Yeah, right in there. Those are mirrored glasses.
You know, I am tired of people blaming everybody else.
Yes.
I didn't make it because the white man got me down. What happened? He didn't have my address?
Yeah.
I was left off the mailing list? You know, I felt kind of bad. Nobody ever told me white man was good. There is no white man. It's a lie. I didn't make it because black people now get my jobs. It's a lie. David Duke, Sharpton, Jackson, Farrakhan, they always give these things.
Yes.
It's an excuse, and these people run for these excuses because nobody wants to wake up and look in the mirror.
People always talk about problems. They don't talk about solutions.
That's right. I don't. That's right.
And you're talking about solutions.
Solutions. You want something, then you work for it.
Let's start out. We're all being screwed. Okay.
Now let's do something for it.
Okay, we're all screwed. We had a lousy life. We had lousy parents. We had lousy this. Or we had lousy social diseases or whatever.
Good excuse.
Fine. Good. Now,
what do we do?
That's all you're saying.
That's it.
And people get mad at you for that.
That's good because it hurts.
But isn't it amazing? I mean, you're not saying, okay, you all are great. You all are college graduates. You're all of this. Now, I want you to go back and be lousy and feel guilty. But you're not doing that. All you're trying to do is say, let's go somewhere.
The truth hurts.
Yeah.
It's so much easier for somebody to say the white man has me here than to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, start busting his butt from 6 to night, studying, reading, working hard. A lot of these kids say, well, you know, I'm flunking math. And I says, yes, and I realize you study 4 hours a day. Nah, I don't do that, really. It's a good excuse. You know, I had the excuse.
Yes.
Great story.
Yeah.
I went to a black university, Southern
University in New Orleans.
See, and I used my little, I'm not stupid, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All my life, if I ever did bad in school, I said, yeah, well, teacher knew I was black, she didn't like me. Or I was tall, I played basketball.
Couldn't do that at SUNO.
No, so the first time I didn't do good in this class, I failed the class. And the first thing came out of my mouth was, yeah, well, the only reason I flunked this class is because I'm...
Just like everybody else here.
Tall, fat. It was incredible. It took the excuse away.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to make an excuse.
You really talk about that in the book, and I thought maybe you were going to say, oh, I'm over here, the professors are black, the students are all black, men and women, everybody, top to bottom, black. And you said there was no, they had the same hierarchy. You made more money, you were a professor, you were an assistant professor, you were a senior, you were a junior. And you said, I thought maybe you were going to not like that. But on the other hand, you said you felt comfortable with it because it took away that part of it.
And you know, this is something amazing.
Even though nobody really likes segregated schools.
But look, in colors, black people have that now.
Yeah.
You're light skin, you're dark skin.
Yes.
You're too dark, you're too light.
Sure.
You're trying to be white, you're trying to be black. White people have it. Think about this racism thing.
Yeah.
In Ireland today, white people, cousins, same last name, look exactly alike, both believe in Jesus Christ.
Right.
They murder each other
Absolutely.
every day.
It's terrible.
Because one's Protestant, the other's Catholic, and you cannot sit here and tell me 10 things different between a Protestant and a Catholic.
No.
It's an excuse.
No.
Racism has nothing to do with the color of your skin.
Yeah.
It's a simple human trait that we all have, and it's so much easier to put somebody else down because of the way they look, the way they act, the way they feel, in order to make yourself look better.
Yes.
Anybody who can hear my voice, remember this. If you ever know anybody who has that garbage in their body, the truth is, don't be mad.
Yeah.
Feel sorry. Because every time they wake up, when they look in that mirror, they don't like what they see.
They're not happy.
A number of people who know me well feel that I'm more centered today than I was a number of years ago. Years ago, I was half of a whole.
Yes.
Now I've taken on so many of Milt's characteristics, so many of his points of view. I feel much more a complete person.
Mm-hmm. In the early days of your grieving process, which you're still obviously, all of us, I think you continue to grieve in different ways, you found some benchmarks of, I'm going to be okay, or it's getting a teeny tiny, infinitesimally small better, feel better, or whatever, by starting to talk for Milt.
Yes.
When you walked into the apartment, if he thought it was too hot, or which way it was, you thought you always thought it was too cold, or you'd come in and do the opposite and say out loud, this damn place is too cold or too hot or whatever. And you found yourself doing that, didn't you?
I find myself today. I never put a dishwasher. I never put it correctly. The dishes didn't go toward the center where the water was and so on. And now I find, and he always used to come by and rearrange things. And now I arrange them the way he would want
have
them.
done it.
And you do that automatically. It's
Isn't that
amazing how much of someone else you take on yourself.
Well,
you know with your parents, for example.
Yes,
are your parents alive?
Both of them are dead. Yes.
Now, how many times have you done things that your dad did or your mom did?
All the time. In fact, I converse with them daily. My father's been dead since 1975, it's 15 or 16 years ago. And my mother for, it's going on 7 years ago. And I just remember them with great joy and great happiness and wish that they were around. A little personal story, if I can. This is your time to talk about your book. My brother and I were at his house before my mom's. She was at the funeral parlor, and that first where you have to go to the funeral parlor and do all that stuff you do. That ritual that I don't think we like, but in some ways, as you mentioned in the book, is maybe kind of a healing thing that we should go through. And we were talking about, of all things, what jewelry that she was supposed to have on. Not that she was very poor and modest means, but you know, costume jewelry. The undertaker called and said, we think we should have something for around her neck. And so we're there. I mean, this craziness about who cares what jewelry. But anyway, in that process, we were late. And I think not too unconsciously, neither one of us wanted to go. And all of a sudden, he looked at his watch and he said, "Oh, God, we're late." And I said, "Oh, we are." And he looked at me and said, "But who's going to tell us we're late?" And we both started crying because we didn't have anybody left to tell us. We were, yeah, whatever. And it was a very touching and sad moment at that point. And it brought a release that I think we needed at that very point. Those small things that you take for granted. And that's what you talk about in your book. Yeah. The whole time reading it, I kept wanting to hug you.
Well, the two of us.
Yes. Yeah, I know, kind of teary.
Two therapists in tears.
Yes, exactly.
But it's okay to cry. And I think that's one of the things that we as professionals can teach people.
Sure.
That tears are healing. When you have somebody who is depressed, and you have somebody who is bereaved, you have two people who are experiencing depression. Mm-hmm. The difference seems to be that those people who are bereaved are more capable of crying, that the tears of grief are very healing. They contain the brain's natural opiates. I have
you have a hanky.
Hanky somewhere.
Right behind you on the other side, closer to you, yes.
The endorphins from the brain are released into the tears, which is a form of comfort and a chemical form of comfort. And also the tears of grief contain the toxic products of stress. Mm-hmm. So you get it out of your system. But those moments that are poignant, that you remember of your mom, and people say that you don't become an adult until you've lost both parents.
Yes.
Do you feel that's
Absolutely. True? And I still, as I talk to them, I use them, if you will, as to pray or intercede, because they were both such really incredibly good people. It gives me comfort, and I kind of talk to them on I hate to say almost, well, not hate to say, every day, kind of. People say they think I'm very strange. I say, well, I'm by myself in the house. It's not with my wife. It's right there, and I'll be talking. But every now and then I'll share with her what I've said. But I told somebody recently, I said, you know, when you're going through a tough time in your life, and I have a very compassionate, wonderful, warm partner in my wife, and she's just so supportive. I said, but there are things sometimes that you just feel somewhat infantilized because of the pressure of this or that, or a failure, or a perceived mistake. Sometimes I really miss having the opportunity to pick up the phone and call my mom and dad in New Jersey and just say, "Hi, Ma," because they always were good. They always took care of me over the phone. "We love you. You'll be fine. It'll be okay." And I resent the fact that I don't have one, you know, and every now and then we just need some. At least I feel like it would be nice to have that. Yeah. And you don't know that when you're 25 or 27 and they're going, "Anthony, you know what you ought to do? You ought to do." And you go, "Right, Mom, right, Dad." And it's that old saw again of you don't know what you're missing until it's not there for you. But there was a very good experience around
that's
parents.
An interesting part of grief. There are so many people who think they're going out of their minds if they talk to someone who's not there, or have almost a hallucination.
You mentioned that in your book.
I saw Milt at a bus stop and he disappeared. Other people have the sense that if they go to where the person is working, or they go to where the person frequented, maybe even a bar, and they go in quickly, that somehow magically they'll be there.
They'll catch them.